Welcome to the House with Azor podcast. I'm your host, William, and joined today with Sean.
Hello.
And we'll be discussing a non-traditional Christmas movie because everybody always talks about, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. There's all the memes about is something a Christmas movie or not. And a movie that you don't really hear about in that conversation too much these days is Batman Returns. It's a superhero film, but it's really not a superhero film. 1992, so it's been a while. Because Batman 1989 was the one that kind of set up what any future superhero films are going to be, with like a little bit more grounded in reality type situation, or a little bit grittier as opposed to, before that you had what? Superman. You had those films, the Richard Donner, like Superman 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4.
Yeah, I mean, even still after this, it was like, these were still Burton's films, so it wasn't like there was a blueprint to take from this exactly.
Yeah.
Really, I feel like it really was after like Spider-Man and X-Men. That's when it was like, okay, we've seen a few different ways to handle these between Superman and Batman and all that.
Well,
and the smaller ones from the 90s that were the Blade and all that stuff.
Yeah, and like we've talked about some superhero films, like we covered Blade.
We've covered quite a few, actually.
We've discussed a lot of them,
yeah.
But I think this one warrants a discussion for an episode of a podcast because even though it's a Batman movie, it's not based on any specific graphic novel or storyline that I'm aware of. It was kind of just... so I think the background of this is, Tim Burton, he had made some short films and stuff, and then he had made, was it the short film like Frankenweenie?
Yeah, and Disney had let him do a bunch of stuff, and he almost kept failing upwards. But I think they probably saw something in him. It was fostering creativity, which was a cool, which is a good thing. It could be looked as failing upwards, but apparently they saw something in him, and he's like paid it back with all these Disney movies he's remaking now. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean...
But yeah, so essentially he did that. He was working on, what was it? What was the film he was working on? He said he was having to draw all these little foxes.
Oh, yeah, I forget which one.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me now.
Basically, his career trajectory is that he did, was it Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Yeah, Frankenweenie basically got him that after... Paul Rubens saw Frankenweenie based on some recommendations. He said after the first 6 shots, he knew that was the guy he wanted to direct his film.
And then he did Beetlejuice, which is, of course, an iconic film that, we've done an episode on. Everybody, a lot of people from our age group have that as like one of their favorite movies. Of course, there was a TV series attached to it. He did Edward Scissorhands, which is, the Johnny Depp Winona Ryder movie.
He did that in between
Beetlejuice and Batman.
No, I think he did something
Returns.
between Batman and Batman Returns, and I believe it was Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah, I could look up.
I think.
But just the important point is he just kind of did these kind of screwball movies that had a very specific style to them in terms of the visual aesthetic and the props and the sets and all of that type of stuff.
And so I was reading a book. Let me see. The title of it is Tim Burton, the Iconic Filmmaker and His Work. It was by Ian Nathan. And one thing that was mentioned in there was that he, I think, first submitted something to Disney, and they said it was maybe a bit too derivative of the illustrations from Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
And that, I never thought about that, but that struck a chord with me because we always think of him having a Gothic style, but really it is like some of his films are the perfect blend of Dr. Seuss, through a Gothic lens, like especially Beetlejuice, I think.
Yeah.
It's just all of the curls and a lot of his, the trees just... it's like, oh, it all makes sense. The sandworm, okay, that's how I am going to define Tim Burton from now on.
You could even think, too, a lot of this is basic story tropes of Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is kind of like the Cat in the Hat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
So, again, kind of an agent of chaos that comes in and throws things. But, a lot of times, a visual style... because, now it's like, oh, everybody's like, oh, it's homage. But, back in that era is more of, they're just ripping off this, as opposed to now it's like, oh, you're inspired by this. Because now is very much a thing to, especially a lot of the stuff now that's all kind of 80s throwbacks with the color palettes and the lighting. And
yeah. I think people were doing it back then.
People have always done it since the beginning of art.
We have the internet now to more people discuss that. And it's more I don't want to say accept it, but it's just more talked about. And so more people do it, seems like.
I don't know that, I mean, there very well may have been a ton of people, but I don't know there's as many people walking out of the movie theaters after seeing 1989 or 1989's Batman. So yeah, I really saw like the German expressionism.
No, there probably wasn't a lot, but I'm saying that as far as the directors doing it intentionally.
Oh yeah, I mean, like since the beginning of any art,
that's what I was talking
people
about.
have always taken inspiration from and used things that they like from the other art in their own art.
Yeah.
But just the point being, the Batman Returns. So 1989 Batman was a movie that before it came out, it kind of got, it was back in the pre-internet days, really. Like it existed, but it wasn't what it is today in any shape or form. And it was mostly about magazines and writer, letters to the editor and like the fan stuff. And Tim Burton being attached to the movie with Michael Keaton, like that got a lot of backlash. People were not happy about Michael Keaton. He's like, this guy's a comedian. It's Mr. Mom. We don't want Mr. Mom being Batman.
Yeah, because Beetlejuice hadn't come out yet, they said, basically.
Yeah,
so that's kind of what they knew him from, aside from, some other stuff. But it was like, oh, it's Mr. Mom, which, it would almost, not quite, but it would almost feel like Steve Carell does 40-Year-Old Virgin, and then he gets cast as Batman. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I think, too, like, there were rumors that Bill Murray was contender for the Batman and stuff. So if you imagine Bill Murray being in it, then you kind of think the 1960 series with Adam West. You think that direction. But, they cast Michael Keaton.
And essentially, he said basically he wanted to... One reason why he went with Michael Keaton was that he didn't want like a Schwarzenegger or somebody. I think he was maybe one that was mentioned as well.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want this big hulking guy that didn't need a costume to be intimidating.
Yeah.
And Michael Keaton was somebody who had to wear the costume to be intimidating, which makes total sense. It's like, aside from the identity hiding stuff.
And then the first movie, they got Jack Nicholson attached, so their budget went up, but also the prestige factor went up. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people... what's the line from Django Unchained? It's like, you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people then the movie came out, smash success, one of the most successful movies of the year, launched 1 billion pieces of merchandise, and everybody had a Batman poster or something from those movies. That merch was everywhere. The movie did super well. Jack Nicholson's role was revered. People liked Michael Keaton, all that stuff. So the movie was so successful. And it wasn't like today where they sign everyone on. When you sign a contract to do one movie, you signed a 6-movie deal with all this stuff built in. Like with Tim Burton and Keaton, it's kind of like one and done, right? Mm-hmm. Like they didn't sign them for
as far as I know,
films.
yeah.
So they signed them for the first film. It was a rousing success, more than they probably could have imagined. And then like, okay, we want you to do the next one. But it wasn't like they were chomping at the bit. They like had to do something with these films. They didn't have a 3-film, they didn't have a Christopher Nolan 3-film arc for what they wanted to do. They just made that movie. And then I think in order to convince him to make Batman Returns, they kind of just had to go further and further and allowing him to say, okay, you can just make a Tim Burton movie that has Batman in it.
Yeah.
And then in doing that, we got the movie that we're going to be discussing.
And he also mentioned too, like that was mentioned in the book, but also the special features. I don't know if it was him or I think he basically said another reason why he decided to do it was that first one he didn't really get to do what he wanted to do. And I don't think that it was necessarily from a creative control standpoint completely. Yeah. I think it was a hard production. You know what I mean? They were apparently they were rewriting, I think, on set and everything. I think it was a big movie. I know the budget wasn't huge. What was it? Was it only like 15 million or something?
I think it rose up as they went along. Yeah. With Nicholson attached.
But it wasn't, this was, I think, a different beast for him. And I guess he felt like he could probably get a handle on a little bit better.
The budget was estimated at 35 million. 35. I think I'd seen like 40. So the domestic gross was 251 million. The worldwide gross is 411 million. If you adjust
15 seems low, but I thought I read that somewhere, so it must have been another film. That may have been, could have been a different film.
I just know that they said that they had a lower budget beginning, and they got Jack Nicholson attached. The budget went up.
And apparently Nicholson, I think he got a percentage on it, and then he got to work on his own hours. He got to set his own hours. Yeah. And there was one other thing too, but they said when he worked, they said he was just phenomenal. He lit up the set. He really put in the work. It wasn't like he made all these demands and then called it in, and it doesn't look like that either. But
you don't want to throw shade on any specific actors, but you do see a lot of people now and today that do a lot of direct-to-video movies, or you see they're very clearly cashing the check because they still have international draw to their name. And like with Batman, like Nicholson was in, he was giving that his all.
Look, I like him, a lot of his performances, but it has the appearance sometimes that somebody that comes on, Michael Madsen, sometimes I see him pop into stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, he does not as shine. He doesn't shine as much as he does in other things. And that could be the director. That maybe the director really matters for him, or maybe it means.
Well, I think a lot of it too is with different actors, depending on who they are. So you have, actors that have worldwide box office power. Them being in a movie, so Bruce Willis being in a movie sells it overseas. So there'll be, somebody like him. There's plenty of actors in that range where there's somebody whose name alone will sell, $5 million worth of rentals and purchases in Europe and Asia or something. So they know, okay, the financials on this. If we get this person attached, we know for a fact we can sell it in these foreign territories. We know we can make this much money back. How much of them can we afford? And then they pay this actor $1 million to shoot for 3 days in Hawaii. So of course they're going to be like, well, yeah, I'll go to Hawaii, have a nice little vacation, and spend a few days working.
Yeah.
And they kind of churn it out. Like, I don't think Nicholson's ever done that. And even in like today's world, he's retired versus doing that type of stuff. Scorsese should have convinced him to come back for The Irishman, which I still haven't seen yet. But to get everybody who's been retired to unretire.
It's good.
So Batman Returns. So this was a movie
Spoiler, he shows up as the Joker in The Irishman.
And then
the CGI, they made him look like young Joker.
And Joaquin Phoenix fight.
Yeah, there's a knife fight with Robert De Niro as the comedian.
So Batman Returns. Did you see this in theaters?
No, I did not. I don't think the first Batman film I saw in theaters was Batman Begins.
So I remember seeing the original Batman in theaters. Back then, movies ran for so long. Yeah. I think it was probably in 1990. I was like probably 5 years old.
Third run. Theater,
so I had seen it in theaters, and I remember having the toys and stuff. And then Batman Returns came out in 1992, so I would have been like 6 or 7, so a little bit older, a little bit more able to grasp the movie. And people forget this was a summer movie. This was like a tentpole movie for Warner Brothers that was set during Christmas. I mean, but there are movies that have done that. Iron Man 3 set during Christmas, but not as explicitly as this one with snow and Christmas trees and.
I found that, I don't want to say odd, but he has all the snow and Edward Scissorhands and stuff. Like I'm not saying it's odd. It's just interesting that there was nothing in this film that really felt. That gave any sort of reason for that other than aesthetically almost.
Well, and the fact that it's a penguin.
Yeah. I mean, for the cold, but yeah, they even make a point of like, oh, we're running for mayor, and like it's December, like it all feels a little shoehorned almost.
It's like, oh, that's changed.
But like the fact that Batman lost his parents, like the holidays can be hard on a lot of people. There was nothing there emotionally for anybody, any of the characters, even Penguin or anything about like Christmas or family, when there was an opportunity and it wasn't the direction they went. I'm not saying it's wrong because this movie, I love this movie as well. And also too about, Batman, Michael Keaton not being, I guess, super big or central in this film. Like I don't feel like he's lacking in it, but apparently, while they were making it or writing it or whatever, even on set, I think Michael Keaton kept telling the writer, cut those lines, cut his own lines. He wanted less of him. It wasn't because he didn't want to be in it. He felt that Batman was very guarded anyway. I mean, that's why he wears the mask. So he wasn't somebody that wanted to go give big, long speeches and monologues and stuff like that. He was more of a silent type.
The first movie kind of covered his backstory in terms of what happened to his parents. Mm-hmm. So you don't need to really rehash that a lot because it gets really tiring if you just keep showing the same guy flashing back to his parents' time when he's a kid. Sure, it's traumatic, but we get it. So I think, and I've read that too, that he, just pushed to like pull lines and just only keep what was necessary of his character.
I think it was for the better.
Well, just because you start this movie and like the way that the Batman character's portrayed in these two films, it's just, I love that in the beginning they have like the tree lighting and then the gang attacks and they turn on the bat signal and Bruce Wayne's just sitting his ass on the couch, not doing anything, just waiting for something to happen. And the second that the light comes on, then he gets to go into action. And it's just funny because he would just be sitting around waiting for something to happen.
I always love that when, sometimes it's hard to make a better sequel than the original film. But when it is a superhero film or something, the sequels are always great because they can pretty much just start out like at 100. You know what I mean? You don't have to wait for them to grow or whatever. I mean, I know the original Batman pretty much starts out with him being Batman, but you know, they really amp it up in this one. It's not like he's in the shadows and you don't see him for a bit. It's just like he comes out and starts kicking ass.
And two, like, so, you know, he shows up and it's funny because there's a lot of, you know, consternation on the internet now or today about how they handle Batman. But in this movie, like, I didn't really care too much that he just straight up killed people. But, like, I don't know. It's one of those kind of, like, cheats where what he technically did on screen wasn't him, like, putting a gun to someone's head and pulling the trigger.
Yeah, it wasn't the same as...
But strapping a bomb to someone and knocking him down a sewer.
And again, that's a very cartoonish thing, though. You know what I mean? Like, I think the whole tone of it all gets away with it more than if Christopher Nolan's Batman would have executed some, you know, the Joker on the street or something. Because that one is so much about the character of Batman and his beliefs and mythos. This is like, you know, this is about Batman, but again, they take such I'm trying to think of the right word, liberties with the villains and every Penguin being half Penguin basically. You know,
pretty much.
This is definitely through a Tim Burton lens.
They took the name Oswald Cobblepot, and they took, you know, Selena Kyle. They took those names and the general iconography of what the characters kind of look like, and then just did their complete own thing. I mean, the origin story of Selena Kyle being like a put upon secretary who gets thrown out of a window and licked by cats, and then she has 9 lives. That's kind of its own thing.
Apparently the 9 lives thing wasn't planned before shooting, and as they were going, they're like, oh yeah. And then it kind of worked out with the end because they reshot the end to have her pop up because I guess the test audiences, they responded so well to her.
And then, you know, the Penguin's kind of like a half-human penguin creature deal. But, you know, like the movie, like we said, so it's set during Christmas. It's pretty violent, but in the 90s PG-13 way.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
So, yeah, like, I don't think kids today see worse stuff on, you know, the news and procedural television. It's definitely YouTube videos or whatever, but the point is just, like, the implication of some of this stuff is like, oh, Batman just straight up lit a guy on fire with his car. Yeah. He just flared up the afterburner.
It is like a live-action version of a Looney Tunes cartoon. You know what I mean? Those are just as violent. It's just... they're rendered in animation, and this is one step removed, I think, from a reality-based superhero movie.
Because it's not, like I said, like a more gritty, realistic take, but it's not realistic in the sense of they're out in the streets of actual New York City running around where it's hyper-realistic. It's just, it wasn't as cartoony or as jokey, and it just had more money behind it and, you know, had more adult themes, maybe. Is what I meant by that, more so than like it was gritty realism, because it's not realistic at all. It shows like some of the wide shots of Gotham City. It is complete not real city.
So apparently they built the original set to last for a sequel, even though they didn't know. I guess for sure they built that set to last, and they said I think they built it in England. They did like a stellar job on it, but when they did the sequel, I think they actually just rebuilt it because I think Tim Burton said everybody involved creatively, too, didn't want to just make the same thing again. Yeah. You know, they didn't want to just like, okay, we're going to just do a rehash. Like, they wanted to kind of almost start from scratch. And he said this was more of just another chapter versus a sequel. And it feels like that, where it's like we don't care what happened in the other film, really. Like, Batman has his backstory. Those things happened. But it's like you do not care at all. I would almost like some superhero films to be serialized like this. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's...
Or non-serialized.
Yes, non-serialized, because I think that's when they can kind of... I don't know. I mean, obviously there's strength to that with the Marvel films, but you can't have different directors come in and play with... play with the stories.
It's kind of what Logan did, where it kind of winked and nodded and acknowledged, like, oh, this is a character. But then... Because in Batman Returns, he does mention Vicky Bell at some point. And that's kind of it. I mean, that's really the only connection. But, I mean... you know, so this movie, Tim Burton, you know, he has like the dial of how Tim Burton is this movie. And the first one was probably like on an 8, 7. Like you could definitely, like what I mean by that is you could definitely see his touches, but a lot of it was more, you know, it's an actual building. It's a realistic location. They're not showing as much of the, but then this one, like the zoo set and all that stuff, that's just turned to 11.
I don't know. But it's still Batman. You know what I mean? It is turned 11, but I think if you're talking about Tim Burton, turned to 10. that's got to be Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhand. This is like a 9.5. You know what I mean?
I'm just saying that like the first Batman movie, if you were to take it on the context of being a Tim Burton movie, the first one is, like a 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And then this one, Batman Returns, is all the way up to 10.
It's a jump up, yeah.
Because, you have, the more tragic story. It's not just a gangster that gets knocked in a vat of acid who then becomes an even badder, gangster. This is about, a tragic character who was born deformed and abandoned by their parents and raised in a circus and raised by penguins, I guess, who don't live in sewers.
I think so, yeah.
Or maybe it's just that the circus people found him and they had animals at the circus that he would see. So I don't know. But the point just being that it has like more of the tragic arc to it where the penguin kind of parallels Bruce Wayne of being from an affluent family. Mm-hmm. But instead of the trauma being that his parents died, it's his parents rejected and tried to kill him.
Yeah.
So you have all these
and Batman's pretending to be a bat. Penguin is actually half penguin.
Yeah. Well, and then too, like in the movie itself, there's even a point where Penguin's like, the real thing is, you have to dress up like a freak. I get to be one every day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's like the scene where Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne meet at the Shrek ball.
Yeah.
And everybody there is a masquerade. They're all wearing masks. And then Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle are wearing their mask, but their mask is their face and dressing normal.
Yeah.
So it's just like all this very on the nose.
We were kind of talking about this before the podcast, like online. And it is like the Joker's the perfect foil to Batman. But they managed to turn Penguin into something else in this that I think it makes him far more interesting than you would have expected. Instead of just being this kind of, affluent guy with one of those, what are those called, the long cigarette holders.
Because they gave him one, he like spits it out.
Yeah, and squawking,
because he doesn't have like the monocle.
So you talked about the tone of it too. There was something in the book, a line in the book that is, his films are often very funny without quite being comedies, sad without quite being tragic. And I definitely think that's how you could probably describe most of his films. Yeah. They've always got like a hint of tragedy to them, especially like Edward Scissorhand, man. Yeah. It's like, the Frankenstein story.
Well, then Beetlejuice, the young couple dies in the beginning. I mean, so there's all these different things that, you can look at thematically. Just like the thing about the movies, like you said, there's all these kind of like on-the-nose issues of the duality because the Penguin and Catwoman are both different versions of how someone arrives to be a Batman-type character and then how they go in that direction. And Selena Kyle's like this weird mixture of kind of like a put-upon, meek, mousy secretary who then, when she gets pushed too far, kind of cracks and then hates men, but is also extremely like sexually charged. Mm-hmm. It's like this weird mixture of she like, oh, Batman, I'm going to bang you and kill you.
Yeah.
And Batman's kind of in on it. So, and then too, like, you forget about the fact that this was, I know that like they arrived at this film by kind of letting Tim Burton just make a Tim Burton movie. And I'd watch that one thing you share where it's like, they said, we didn't trick anybody. We didn't say this is like a children's film, but people were upset about it regardless. Yeah. So
because there were toys being sold for it.
But on the other hand, I mean, come on. You're making a Batman movie. Who's going to be driving the numbers.
For them, I agree with them being like, as far as the creatives behind it, being like, I don't care if they want to make toys, whatever, but I'm like definitely Deadpool. I'm not toning it down. I wouldn't want to compromise what I was doing if the studio was fine with it, which they were.
Well, you think, because, this is a different era, too, because this is the era where Terminator 2, RoboCop, all had toys and all that stuff. And, of course, there's the Batman animated series that came out, soon after that had, like, the Danny Elfman score and stuff, or the version of his score for the theme song of the show. But, like, my memory of this movie is I did see this in theaters at a drive-in with my cousin and my aunt. So this being in the 90s, my cousin was a couple years older than me, so she was, like, 9. And then my aunt would be, probably, like, in her late 30s or whatever, or mid-30s. I don't remember. Early, mid-30s. They hated it. They did? Because it was, the first movie... I think a lot of times, too, people only see some of those big spectacle movies on TV. Or they see it on video at somebody's house in chunks. So the original Batman, they're like, oh, Batman, Michael Keaton's Batman, he was cool, and Vicky Vale was really pretty, and Jack Nicholson's a great actor. Oh, let's go see this new one. And then, like when Penguin bites the guy's nose and it's gushing blood, and he eats the fish, like they were grossed out. They were grossed the hell out.
Apparently, he really ate fish, too. He said he just put some lemon juice on there. And then it was his idea to squirt all that black stuff in his mouth before every scene, which is phenomenal.
But
He also went for it.
But then the inverse of that was, so they both hated it and disliked it because it was gross and whatever. I, on the other hand, loved it. And because, like, it's funny because you talk about it wasn't for kids, but that year for Christmas, I remember getting, like, different books about it because they had, like, the novelizations and, like, the more graphic, or not graphic novels, but, like, the books geared towards kids, or, like, the comicization of the movie, but toned down. I remember having those. We had a tent that was like the little PVC pipes that pushed together. You put the plastic cover over. I had a Batman Returns tent.
I had when the original film came out before this one. Like, one of my favorite Batman toys was, I think it was based on the original film, where you squeeze his legs.
Yeah.
And his cape comes out. I bought a sealed version, like, within the past, like, 5 years. But yeah, like, I bought a lot of those toys as well. I mean, and, you know, they people want to buy them.
And I remember having the Batman where his suit was white. Yeah. With, like, the black cape. And I wish I still had that stuff.
I've got a few of them. I went over to my parents' house, you know. Yeah. And I found, like, I have way more Batman toys than I thought, because I mainly only bought Ninja Turtles. Well, and I'm like, that's my number 2 there, Batman.
Too, I had action figures, Robin figures they made at the time, where it was actually modeled off of Marlon Wayans, because they were going to make him Robin in one draft of it. I think he was going to be, like, the mechanic for the Batmobile, like, to be, like, transitioned into traditional Robin later. But they did a lot of that kind of seeding stuff in, because they had, like, was it Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent?
And that's who Max Schreck was going to, that role was going to be, got turned into Max Schreck, essentially, they said. But yeah, and they said with Robin, too, they said there was just too many characters going, you know, too many characters, so they threw them out, which is a good choice. You know, everybody is well known, like, Spider-Man 3 with studio interference, like, they made too many characters in that film. Yeah, and that's why it suffered.
3 villains. I mean, I think, too, part of it is, in order for you to have multiple, like, villains in one hero, the hero needs to be kind of because I think Michael Keaton's Batman was pretty well defined. You didn't need to know a whole lot more about him. You didn't need to see a ton of character development. You just saw, like, with him and Selena Kyle, you saw someone that he saw as kind of like a similar person that he yearns, like, oh, maybe this will work because we're similar that way. As opposed to, you know, somebody else like Vicky Vale is not similar enough, and then eventually it wears on her.
Yeah.
So you see, like, those little elements and little touches, but, like, to me, this movie, like, the stylistic elements of it, where the later Schumacher movies really just rubbed me wrong, like, with how fake the city felt.
I mean,
and how
he went back to the Adam West ones. You know, he was older. He was an older director. I think that was, like, what he talked about. I think what I've read or talked about is essentially like, hey, I just want to go back to that style.
Well, and two, the other thing is, so, like, whereas the first Batman movie felt a little bit more like a real location, like a real city, this one felt like a heightened, stylized city that's just kind of, you know, movie logic doesn't really exist. But it still felt gritty, and it felt more on the side of realism, like almost kind of like the retrofuturism of, like, how cities look in the people would envision in the 1950s. But then the Schumacher movies took those same basic, like, outlines of what the city looked like in the Burton movies, but made it neon and glitzy and glowy and fake and and then showed a lot of it was the problem. Had them traversing the city, because the Batman animated series had a very similar design palette to the Batman Returns, really. But I enjoyed that because it wasn't as hokey looking, and they didn't have all the, you know, villains and day glow neon nightlight stuff all over them.
Yeah. But I mean, I like some of those Schumacher, some parts of those Schumacher films, but you have to trudge through some not so great stuff to get to some good moments. You know, that's the problem with those. And it's like, once you've seen them, like, once or twice, you're like, okay, those great moments aren't great enough to sit through.
Well, and two, you have the really heightened Jim Carrey performance,
which I like,
but just, like, you know, when you go back to Batman Returns and, like, the kind of super, super dark, you know, everybody talks about movies now being, like, grim dark, and, you know, the Zack Snyder movies are being super dark and stuff. But, like, I don't think that the Zack Snyder movies had it as dark and foreboding as a feeling as Batman Returns. Well, I would say the difference is Batman Returns sets up this world where there's a half penguin kid born that their parents throw away.
Yeah, I think there's, like, a sense of humor throughout the entire world of his, where Zack Snyder doesn't feel like there's a sense of humor. You know what I mean?
I'm trying to think how to articulate what I'm thinking. It's just like, in that world, I don't know, it feels less manufactured and forced in, like, Batman Returns and Batman, like those original ones. Like, the darkness just feels like part of a milieu.
Yeah, more organic.
And it feels just like, this world is kind of crazy. And then, not just single out Zack Snyder, but it just seems like sometimes he, like, with his movies, though, because, like, the Watchmen show up, and I've watched parts of the original movie, and just everything is taken so damn serious and without any humor, and the darkness is kind of forced to the character actions versus just being like the characters live in a dark world, if that makes any sense.
Yes, yeah.
And both of those things have their place and work in the right settings and the right actors and stories. It's just like Batman Returns was a story that was not an adaptation of. They didn't try to hit a bunch of marks, because the things a lot of times they do is they take a general, story arc, because like the Nolan movies took like Batman Year One and Batman The Long Halloween and Batman blah blah. So you take these other stories and kind of hit a lot of the beats that those stories are told that are from the lore. Only use those as kind of like signposts, and they're probably working through the script to be like, okay, what if we have the moment like this? Mm-hmm. They probably, like the whiteboard moments from like all those storylines, as opposed to this movie felt like they from the ground up built everything.
Yeah, I mean,
and didn't really care about continuity.
I think Snyder. I mean, what did Snyder build Batman vs Superman on? Was it just? I mean, that basically. I mean, because Doomsday comes.
It was built. I guess
it was the death of Superman.
It was kind of built off Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, Dark Knight Returns. So he also did that, but from what I was reading, like Burton was not a comic book fan, really. He said for some reason it never connected with him, but he was a fan of the Adam West show. And then he did read, and I'm sure it was probably in preparation for this, I assume, but he did read the Miller, Dark Knight Returns and all those. So it is interesting that it's like, even though we got versions of those or films inspired by those, like we pretty much got those from the quote unquote beginning, not including like the 40s Batman films and the Adam West ones, but shortly after those were published, we got a Batman film that was informed by it in some way.
And two, like those movies, I have to look up and see exactly what age Michael Keaton was at the time, but he wasn't portrayed as a beginning of the career Batman. He was a seasoned Batman that, existed in that world for a while. And then, it's always funny though, like nobody knows that the billionaire is the one who's doing this, the only one. You'd have to think that he was at least paying for it.
Yeah, but I mean, you got a penguin person coming out of the sewer,
who runs for mayor.
Yeah.
I mean,
it almost wins.
And it's funny too, though, because you look at the, like the Christian Bale version, he plays the playboy role out in public enough that it would try to draw suspicion away. It'd be kind of like, not getting political, if you came out and if there's like a vigilante superhero that was taking out all these people using, expensive equipment and all this stuff, and it's Donald Trump Jr. or somebody, like you would.
But all the equipment will be breaking all the time.
Yeah, yeah. But the point, like in today's world, though, like with those Burton movies, Batman is a billionaire who's secluded and lives alone, and everybody thinks is weird. And then there's a vigilante in town who has all this expensive equipment. So it seems like that would be a lot easier to put two and two together.
Yeah. Again, it's Tim Burton, it's just
but at the same time, you don't care because that world is that world.
There's something else too. I don't read in that book, but it was talking about Tim Burton's childhood. There was multiple things that tied into the Batman films. I think it's only like $13 on Apple Books. It was a little bit more on Kindle, so I got on Apple Books. But reading that too, something else to point out was like all these characters that are isolated and kind of alone. Like the characters from the couple in Beetlejuice are literally trapped inside their house and they cannot escape.
Yeah.
Edward Scissorhand, for a while he lives up on that house up on the hill basically. Yeah. And then Batman, he's kind of isolated in some regards to his, like, it's always these characters who are isolated and aren't part of, they don't fit in with anybody else. Well, and I think that's obviously what probably drew him to that first Batman film. He's like, oh, this is an isolated character who had a traumatic past and has a darkness to him, but I can also, do something fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, and too, like, it was funny because I was reading some interviews of Michael Keaton, and then when he was talking about Batman Returns, like, yeah, I made some bad real estate deals at the time, so I picked up the phone when they called. And then they were talking about how he chose not to come back for the third one when Tim Burton wasn't attached anymore. And he's like, yeah, I forget the context. He's picking his kids up or doing something. I was at the theater, and when I was on, so I walked in for a few minutes, and I left. And I was like, I made the right decision.
Yeah.
So, but it's just one of those things where, like, the way he played the character, he did play... Because I think a lot of times you're like, oh, who's the best Batman, best blah, blah, blah. I think that he is still probably the best Batman, like, under the mask. Because he's doing a voice, but it's not the, where's the, like, that type of stuff. He is like all the inner seething rage. Like he's reserved and kind of, you know, on the quieter end when he's Bruce Wayne, but as Batman, like it's all out there. He's in his crazy man mode, just taking all the aggression from his parents' death out on everybody he encounters. And you see that on the screen, and you feel that through the performance. And I think in some of the newer ones, I think like Christian Bale was an amazing Bruce Wayne, but the Batman voice and some of the stuff. But too, like the costume they had Michael Keaton in, like, you know, had the muscles built in and
yeah, and he couldn't turn his neck.
Incredibly limited mobility.
And he said he worked it in the performance to make him like more intimidating, which I think it worked. Like they made all the limitations they had work in these films.
And there's a reason they don't shoot in the Burton movies. There's a reason they don't shoot him in broad daylight, and they do that in the more recent films.
Yeah.
Granted, you have CG now that you can help to punch stuff up, and the physique regimen that they kind of expect of superheroes now is different than, you know, the 90s and 80s. Because even if you look at Hugh Jackman from the first X-Men film to the like Logan and stuff, the expectation for muscle mass has significantly increased, and all that. But, you know, it's just when you watch that movie, like the art direction to it is just something that sticks with me. Like the design of like the penguin's lair and like the zoo around it. And all that stuff. I
mean, you have bold, striking character designs, you know, the performances, bold imagery, like some definitely memorable scenes. Like there's just, and also you put on the layer of it being a comic book film, you know, and especially a lot of people saw it when they were kids at least. And it's just, it hits all those factors where it feels dangerous also. It felt dangerous then a little bit. And even now, you know, just even some of the sexual scenes, they're just like fun and exciting to watch because it is funny at the same time, but it's, you know, not what you see. And like, I think brought this up too, like most of these Marvel films, like they lack any sexuality at all. It is like the most, like, you know, there's relationships, but man, they just take out any amount of sex or sexuality really.
Well, and too, like, you know, this movie's not sexually explicit. I don't even think you see, like, when they're kissing, it's more kind of like traditional, like, film stage kissing. But,
you know.
But the point is, like, the movie itself has so much steamy stuff going on in the scenes with them.
Yeah, which makes it more sexy than just kissing, or even you could show a boob and it'd be way less sexy than Catwoman, Michelle Pfeiffer in leather on a bed, like, writhing around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
that's way sexier than, you know.
Because, like, what's funny is, too, you have that... Because wasn't that I forget which actress really wanted the role. There was...
Sean Young.
She really wanted the role. Didn't she, like, show up dressed like Catwoman trying to get the role?
Tim Burton wasn't in the room. I think Michael Keaton and maybe one of the producers. And yeah, I think she jumped up on the desk and everything. And apparently Michelle Pfeiffer really wanted the role. And who had it? Annette Bening had it before her. She got pregnant. And Michelle Pfeiffer, I think she offered to appear in the first film for free, like as a cameo or something if they want it. Annette Bening got it. She got pregnant. So, of course, Michelle Pfeiffer was very happy. I think she read half the script and agreed. And then she learned to do all the whip stuff herself.
Yeah, which is incredibly impressive.
And she said, but when they got on set, I think she had the high heels and the lights. So they always had to adjust the lights because it was like blinding her, basically.
Yeah.
And then the bird she really put in her mouth. And yeah, she was like, I don't know what I was thinking then. Like, just the lengths everybody went to on these films is just, you know, you really admire and appreciate. And it paid off.
Because it's funny because you go back, like, nobody would ever have an actor put a bird in their mouth now, be CG.
No, yeah.
Because, like, even Tony Todd, we're hearing him talk about the original Candyman, his contract stated when he had the bees in his mouth, every sting that occurred was like an extra few $1,000s on his paycheck. Because I was watching it, like, that movie, and I was like, it seems like a real bird. Like, I couldn't tell if it maybe was, like, a little bit of CG stuff when the bird flies away or what, but...
Yeah, I mean, they use some CG in this, but I don't think they use anything CG like that, because they even mentioned, like, they said there was no visual effects back then, really, which obviously...
Well, the Batarang was...
Obviously, they had some, but I think, you know, I don't think there was any sort of creature VFX at all.
It would look passable.
Yeah, or human-based anything.
Well, because this is, it's 92, so it was prior to Jurassic Park.
And that was the first time people said, oh, it can't be done. Like, I think they were probably too gun-shy to even try that.
And, yeah, so the basic... I mean, I guess we should probably the basic plot of the movie... So the basic plot of the movie is it opens up with an affluent couple that has a deformed child that they then decide just to throw in a stream under a bridge.
Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman. So then you jump forward 30 years. They're doing was a tree lighting ceremony in like the downtown Gotham City. A circus gang comes in and attacks everybody. Batman comes in and stops it, but they're able to swift away Christopher Walken's character Max Schreck, and the Penguin takes him hostage and tells him about the tragedy of his life, and he wants to come back up above ground. And he has a bunch of blackmail on him, from like toxic waste to dead bodies to shredded papers, and Max Schreck, with the Christopher Walken character, he's trying to sell a power plant that's really like a passer to steal power from the city. Very comic book type plot, or 1960 something Batman plot. And he decides that he's going to use the Penguin to try to run for mayor, to unseat the mayor in a recall, or get him impeached or whatever. Catwoman, Selena Kyle is secretary for Max Schreck, who's kind of put upon and lonely, and she finds out that his power plant's really not what he's claiming it's going to be, so he throws out the window to kill her, but cats come and lick her, and she doesn't die. And then she decides to make a cat suit and go out and take it out on men. And then at some point, her and the Penguin decide to work together to take down Batman. And then they're working with the Penguin's working with Max Schreck to be mayor, and then they try to frame Batman for murder. But then Batman is able to, during the course of that, record on a CD all the stuff that the Penguin is talking trash about. Then Batman and Alfred use that audio recording to ruin Oswald Cobblepot's political ambitions. And then he goes crazy, and then his plan is to steal all the firstborn children from Gotham. And then Batman stops that.
Babies in cages.
Yeah. Batman stops that, and then his plan is just to use a bunch of penguins to send rockets out and destroy the city, and Batman stops that.
Yeah, that's I don't want to say a complaint, because there's a bunch of crazy plots that are fun, like him becoming mayor, the babies in cage, the baby, they're taking the babies, the penguins, but it never, it's like so many almost go there and they never do.
Yeah, well, part of it is, too, they're not actually going to kill all the kids.
No, but
they're not going to actually... part of it's probably budgetary, but it's also just... This movie does, like, any of those individual ideas that the Penguin and Shrek had, in most cases, would be the full film.
Yeah.
They wouldn't just be like, he's going to be mayor.
Which I think it makes us move fast, but, spoilers for Black Panther, I think, like, that's why one of my favorite Marvel films is because it is all of a sudden... the villain becomes the king of this kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been very interesting. It could be very interesting to have like a Penguin-like character become mayor, basically in control, and then Batman, you know what I mean, got to fight. I mean, Batman he is a vigilante. He's been on the run from police in many versions of Batman's stories. But I think that would be something that you could have built up the drama more, other than just a set of interesting and fun sequences, because that's what this film is.
Because you have the Ice Queen or Princess or whatever gets killed, and they blame it on Batman because he at one point uses the CG batarang that's like the computer controlled that can fly and hit specific people.
And the dog catches it, right?
The dog catches it, and then they use that to knock out and kidnap the Ice Queen or whatever. Then they knock her off the building and make it look like Batman did it, and then he flies away with his cape in a weird way, because it's one of those things where there's nothing that shows that cape being able to be like like a semi-solid form that can let him use as a glider, because they kind of established that in the Nolan movies. This one is just like, screw it, I'm going to fly off the building.
My daughter, she was watching that part with me. She really liked that part. She's like, oh, he's flying. And that's another thing too, like out of all of the major comic book characters, like, of course, Burton's going to pick the one where the guy can literally be surrounded by bats. Like, you can do some very cool scenes with that. So, like, this is an awesome scene with him flying over the city, everybody going crazy, and bats everywhere. Like, I just love that moment.
And so you have all the cool stuff like that. You have, I remember having the McDonald's toy of the Batmobile, where it shoots out of the normal Batmobile to be thin.
I just found that at my mom's house, too, my mom and dad's house.
And then the Dark Knight kind of had a moment like that, where it goes from the Batmobile like tank to the bike. So a lot of things are seeded early that then get used later, or used again. But then like I said, there was like the gross out moments, the Penguin eating fish, biting the guy's nose. Catwoman putting the bird in her mouth. And then there is the element of her just like her suit, the Catwoman suit, is technically where she takes like a leather jacket and cuts up into pieces and hand strings a suit out of it. Very, very skin tight. It doesn't really show anything. It's not revealing. But it was just
heavy dominatrix vibes.
Yeah,
it's just the
leather with the heels and all the stuff and all
whip.
And the kind of like stitched look to it and the whip. So very heavily sexualized costume, while still not being as overly sexualized as some of the like action figures you see today in the kids aisle at a store, which is like an interesting thing. And this movie is so sexually charged, but they could still sell toys of that didn't cross any boundaries to parents in their mind.
Yeah.
Of course, the Batman suit was the same. And then Oswald Cobblepot was only really in the kind of iconic garb with like the overcoat and the vest and all that stuff, and a very few number of scenes.
Which is really weird. Again, my daughter's 2. We were watching it. All of a sudden, she goes, "He's got a new shirt." I don't know why that, and I didn't even realize that. I was like, I don't know why, But yeah, she noticed that too. She's like, "Oh, he's got a new shirt," and I was like, "Oh, that's when he's wearing what's closer to the classic Penguin."
Yeah, because most of the movie he's just wearing like a gross onesie.
Yeah,
and then they put him in the more traditional wardrobe, and you wonder too, like, well, for the story there was some justification for it, but how much of that was like they're like, look, we need to sell toys. We can't have him in a soiled onesie.
Again, I don't think the creatives behind this were worried about it. I think it was them dressing him up to be mayor. Like,
but I'm sure
even when he comes down the stairs, they're like, "Can we put those gloves on you?" You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm sure though, the writers and Tim Burton probably didn't care about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure some producers were behind the scenes happy
maybe,
that
I don't know. Yeah.
came to be, but
well, that's what Burton, you talked about the Batman, Burton was saying like, oh, for the second one, merchandising was a much bigger thing. He said, but we were in all these meetings and they would go on forever. And they were like, well, what are they going to look like? And they're like, we don't even know what the characters are going to look like. We don't know what we're doing yet because that's how filmmaking is. You know what I mean? Unless it is something like a well-oiled machine like the Marvel films.
Or like if you have, prior art and you have a lot of stuff in place ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because you're introducing characters down the road and doing iterations of their costumes. That this is more of like the Batman costume really didn't change, but they made a bunch of merchandise with different versions of the costume just because they would. Then you had like you had Catwoman and Penguin, and I remember having like the Bat boat or whatever it was that he flies around the sewer. Like you had some variations of those toys that I just kind of vaguely remember from that era. But then like the movie itself too. So all that happens, the Selena Kyle stuff is she has like 9 lives. So, she gets thrown out the window, then she gets knocked off of stuff about Batman and the Penguin, and then Shrek shoots her a few times. She has 1 life left. And at the end, you see like Bruce Wayne's like leaving downtown with Alfred, kind of lonely, and then he thinks he sees Catwoman and Selena Kyle, and he gets out of the car and goes and looks. And then, like, before the movie ends, you see, like, a scene of her head come into the shot with her costume on. That was done after the fact.
Yeah, and they said that cost quite a bit of money. And they were like, no way we can do it. All of a sudden, they were on the phone, and they just shot it over the weekend.
Yeah.
Because also, too, she gets to live out the fantasy of killing her boss.
Yeah.
It's almost like not quite 9 to 5, the Dolly Parton movie, but, it's...
Well, and too, when people... I mean, not the movie is overtly anything, but when people are like, oh, I just liked the movies that didn't have politics in them, and,
oh, yeah, it was totally about political corruption, or not... it was...
Them treating her as less than because she's a woman.
Well, even still, whenever Penguin's henchmen come out at the event... And
he's like, we want the guy in control of everything.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm the mayor. He's like, not you, Shrek.
So like, whenever it is funny to me that people today were like, oh, I like movies that don't have any political context. I know like Joe Bob had made some controversy over saying he liked horror when it wasn't political.
Yeah, that whole thing.
And then it's really funny because in the comments that somebody's like, I bet you think RoboCop's political.
Yeah,
it's like
with the whole thing with that is I was like, what is he coming at? Because he's smarter than that. And I think it was the fact that, just to digress for a minute, I think it was the fact that sometimes it felt, and I think he sort of corrected it, but sometimes it feels now it is very much in vogue to make a politically conscious film. You know what I mean? Like that is a selling point. Somebody locally was doing a film and he was talking about, what's the word I'm looking for? Not political. Socially
aware.
Yeah, socially aware horror film, which I think is, obviously it's what's, but he specifically said it's what's hot right now. And it is. And that's the truth. And no opinion on Black Christmas. That's what he kind of brought it up. But I'm thinking maybe his perspective is that like now sometimes that is just being used to as a starting point, and then they figure out how to just basically use it as a shout box instead of like making a story and it feeling more organic or not being something that feels like it's part of the marketing almost.
Because I think too, like at this day and age, like my Batman Returns, like I think if you kind of intertwine any of that messaging in the fabric of the movie, and it's part of the reason that movie and that script exists, then it doesn't feel like you're being forced.
Exactly.
Because, you know, in this, like this movie, for example, Selena Kyle being put upon and then becoming Catwoman, like there is definitely a bent to that. Yeah. That's not just story. You know, there's some social elements there.
It makes sense for the story. Sometimes in some films now, it doesn't always make sense for the story. It's just, I think they make a point in this one little area and then they ignore it or whatever.
I think too, like if you kind of take a story and then you kind of try to tack all that stuff on at the end and work backwards, that's when it can kind of expose that and seem disingenuine.
Yeah, if it's not done well, for sure.
Because like the short film I was trying to write, I'm writing, it's like how much of this is too on the nose if you try to build something into it. But I mean, I think that just, you know, so I don't want to digress too much to get political. It's just the point was like people always talk about movies today, you know, pushing these messages down your throat. It's like, no, they've always had a message. If you just didn't notice.
If the filmmaker has a perspective and they're not just, not just making a franchise film to make one, you know what I mean?
They Live was not political.
Yeah.
I mean, as you see those obey things everywhere still today. But, you know, like the point, like, so Batman Returns, it had some of that stuff layered in. I mean, it didn't say a ton. It just,
it was very light, but.
And two, like the element of, it's kind of this weird relationship between Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne, where she's like, you know, I could go live with you in your house in your big castle, but I would hate myself for it. Like, so, well, why? Is it because she got kind of crapped upon and just happened to find somebody that would take care of her?
Or it may be
she didn't work her way up to that herself?
Or maybe, maybe she would feel like that was
selling out.
Well, you know, if her role is to finding her, I guess, feminine core and empowerment, she may feel like she's relegated to the housewife. You know, if she doesn't have to make her own way through life. It could have been that. It could have been, it could have been he's everything she rallies against. I don't know. I mean, she was taken in by him. But
he is this billionaire, but you know, she at one point is like, I didn't expect you to be the type of person that would meet with Shrek. Yeah. And he's like, well, I didn't expect you to be the type that would work for him.
Yeah.
But both of them are working actively against him. And it's one of those things too, where, you know, like the kind of, you know, socioeconomic, like he was born into wealth.
Yes.
Because there's like a little bit of commentary there. Like I said, not a lot.
It's all very light, but at least it has a perspective, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and two, because like some people pointed out, like in modern stories, if Bruce Wayne was a billionaire that wanted to make things happen, he probably could through the normal means. But that version is just like he has seething anger and rage inside of him, and that's how he gets it out.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's a shortcut. Violence sometimes is the shortcut, and you know, watching the Watchmen show too, you know, that draws specifically and makes commentary of classic heroes and stuff, and it does seem like, you know, when superhero films were being formed, that was a perspective. Hey, we need a mass vigilante, or we need somebody just to take care of the issues, because that is an easy way to handle it. You think, oh, if there's just somebody to take this person out, it's done. And the real world isn't as clear as that. You know what I mean? Yeah. It would be more like, hey, there's some social and economic issues that Batman can't solve by beating people up. Yeah.
But I think
a billionaire couldn't solve.
But I think in this iteration, it's really just he has like that dark side. Yeah. And that's how he gets it out. And that's why in the first movie he drives into that chemical plant and just drops the bombs that kills 100 people. It blows the building up. Yeah. Because they're all in there shooting the guns at him. So I mean, like he has the bat plane has the machine guns on it. Mm-hmm. So there's just a different take on the character. But it was, you know, basically the main thing they did was they said, what are some characters? So wasn't there something about Tim Burton seeing somebody fall in a vat of acid or liquid as a kid?
So yeah, the book opens up with him talking about when he was younger, he got this kid to come. He's like, oh, come here. He had this kid run to this pool, a neighbor's pool or something. Well, Tim Burton had threw some like pants and a shirt in there, and he said, oh, there was some criminal that escaped, and he got doused with acid and all this stuff, and he fell in the pool and disintegrated, and so the kids thought the guy had just like melted in there. There was that. There was a couple other things too that was like, oh yeah, I could see the inspiration he may have gotten for some of his films. But yeah.
Yeah, so there's just all the kind of the fun stuff like that. And like David Lynch has a lot of stories that like, I saw a woman run outside naked, blah, blah, blah. So that inspired the scene from Blue Velvet. So there's all these different filmmakers that have kind of like these central elements of their childhood that they explore later in a movie. And I think most people, like, there's things I can think of if I ever, like, someone's like, oh, write some big epic. There's probably things I could pull from that I remember happening to me or around me. And it just feels to, like you said, this movie, Batman Returns, just feels like its own beast. It's very lightly connected to the prior film. It has, like, the same actor as Alfred and Bruce Wayne and, like, the mayor. But a lot of the other stuff, doesn't really connect too much. And I'm fine with that. Those kind of like standalone movies where it's just like, here's a character. It's kind of like James Bond. You have some recurring characters, but not a lot of thematic continuity.
Yeah, I think you were talking about they would like that direction for Spider-Man. This is prior to the Marvel, the MCU one. But like, hey, we already have so many different Spider-Mans now. Let's just get a different one all the time. But obviously, we'll see where DC goes, if they do anything past the Batman, which they're... Didn't seem like they make a sequel to the Joker, and because of what that movie did, they are. So if the Batman does as well financially, which I don't see it doing as well, only because of the budget on the Joker was so low. This one seems like it's going to be much higher.
Let's see, because Batman Returns, so it was an $80 million budget, and it shows because they had way more sets and all that stuff. So you have to figure if you have an $80 million budget, a domestic gross of $162 million, which is, double the budget, but that's still, the numbers don't work out to make that profitable. Worldwide, $266 million. So it wasn't
and then the merchandising.
So I would say the movie itself wasn't a bomb. Worldwide, it would have eked out a profit. And that was in the era where VHS rentals were huge and home video sales were huge.
Yeah, I didn't go see either one, but that's how I watched them. Like, as soon as they came, the first one, I watched it right away. And
syndication deals were huge. Because like cable networks would get it and run it into the ground, and then the broadcast networks would make a big deal about premiering the big blockbuster movie eventually on the free channel. So there was a lot of life for movies back then, especially like the top tier big budget movies. And then the merchandising for these movies probably made $1 billion just because it's, blankets. There's probably plenty of kids. I remember having like a sleeping bag and a bed comforter and sheets and pillows. And there's probably tons of kids.
There's just something about Batman. I think I don't know. I can like my daughter. I let her pick out some silverware at the store, and there's like, what are they? Paw Patrol, all this stuff, and she wanted Batman. You know what I mean? Like she likes Batman for some reason.
And two, like I would venture to guess there are a ton of kids who did not see Batman Returns that have Batman Returns merch.
Yeah.
In terms of blanket, sheets, shirt, jacket, whatever, because like, oh, Batman. Mm-hmm. And they're at the store, swimming trunks. There's, a boogie board. There's probably all kinds of crap that people, like skateboards. There's all kinds of stuff that people probably bought as merch. But and I think that the movie having, like, the Penguin mostly in a gross onesie with bile coming out of his mouth, that made it somewhat tough for them to make toys to give McDonald's. I remember reading about McDonald's having problems with it. Like, how the hell are we going to merchandise this movie? We got a S&M cat suit over here. We got black bile coming out of a gross onesie over here.
It's like, don't do it.
And then the same Batman suit from the last movie.
They're probably mad because they know it would sell Happy Meals. And it's like, well, don't do it,
But then they did manage to do it. And that's when they would use like the one...
Of course.
One little scene of the Penguin where he's in the traditional garb. That's where all the toys of him were.
Of course they don't want to walk away from that money. They don't care.
And then, so I mean, like, it's just funny how that works. And then today's world, like, I don't know that the McDonald's type tie-ins are as important. I mean, I don't get kids' meals or whatever, and I don't have traditional...
For a while, Disney walked away because they were so unhealthy, but now they're, like, right now they have Frozen too.
Yeah.
I mean, they... Obviously, I think the world has changed to where there's so many different things pulling for people's money, but it is still a thing. But, it's...
Well, and two, you have so many things now where you have a lot of people do not have traditional cable networks or watch the over-the-air broadcast, so they're not getting commercials in the way they used to, because there's people who have kids that have cable, and I hear them complaining about the damn commercials that you hear all the time and all this stuff. And it's like, I literally have no idea what you're talking about because I have never seen or heard this commercial. And I guess because of targeted marketing and social media, it doesn't go to me because I'm not a parent or a child.
Yeah, we got rid of our cable, but some stuff, I mean, just the kids shows, it's just a barrage, just like when we were kids, a barrage of all these different toys and everything. And then my friends of ours, their son's about to turn 2, and they were watching Charlie Brown Thanksgiving and over at like their grandma's house, and all of a sudden it went to commercial, and he turned around and was like, "Where's Charlie Brown?" Like, because he'd never seen a commercial before. Oh, yeah. He was like confused, and they're like, "Oh, this is a commercial. He'll be back."
Yeah. So I was trying to think. So like in the Tim Burton filmography, trying to remember what came out after this, because like in terms of like where I fall in his work, Tim Burton from Batman Returns backwards, I absolutely love pretty much everything he made. And then after that, he made like what, Ed Wood, Sleepy Hollow, and then there was other stuff he produced. Like, of course, he produced Nightmare Before Christmas,
yeah,
and James and the Giant Peach, and some other stuff.
Yeah, I forgot about that movie. Let's see here. Oh, he directed an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So
because it was Batman Returns, then Ed Wood.
Yeah. Then we have A Visit with Vincent, which I guess is a Vincent Price.
Oh, Mars Attacks.
Yeah, Mars Attacks, Sleepy Hollow, Planet of the Apes. I did go to theaters to see that. Big Fish. I know that's supposed to be one of his better ones. I have not seen it. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I went to theaters to see that. Corpse Bride. The Killer's Bones. I guess the music video. Sweeney Todd. Alice in Wonderland. Dark Shadows. Frankenweenie, the movie. Another Killer's video. Big Eyes. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I did not know he directed that. And then Dumbo. And then now all it says is Beetlejuice 2, which I think the last word is it's not happening now, basically.
But like, so his filmography post Batman Returns to me is far more uneven, because he had a string of movies, because Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns. Like, that's a pretty solid string of hits there, where all those have pretty consistent fan bases. And then after that, a lot of people like Ed Wood. Like, Sleepy Hollow is okay, and it's enjoyable. It's not like that one doesn't have a stamp on it as much.
There's a bunch of his films I have not seen.
But then, like, the Planet of the Apes and a lot of his, remakes with Johnny Depp and stuff. But like he was on fire at that point, and I'm really sad that. I mean, I think because of the box office and the merchandising stuff, they wanted to go in a different direction with Batman. But if they had let him make another one that had Michael Keaton back, and they're allowed to go just as, batshit as they did with that Batman Returns, that would have been something to see. Like, well, if you've already gone that far, what are you going to do next?
Yeah.
Because, like, I think I heard rumors. They talked about maybe having, like, the Scarecrow in it, and, like, people had rumored, like, Nicolas Cage or whatever. I would have liked to see Tim Burton's Batman be out, not in the city. Like, what does it look like if Batman's out, like, at a farmhouse or something fighting the Scarecrow? Like, what does that look like under Tim Burton? Some weird Art Deco Gothic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in the town that Beetlejuice is set in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would have liked to seen his Superman, but...
Superman Lives.
Yeah, I need to watch that documentary.
The Kevin Smith one. I've watched stuff about that where the producers wanted the big spider and they wanted Superman not to fly.
That's right, yeah.
There's all this stuff, and that same producer wanted to make Wild Wild West with that big spider.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Batman Returns to me holds like a special nostalgic place, because I just remember seeing it as a kid.
Where's it at in your top movies?
I don't know if it's in my top 10, but like when you watch movies as a kid, I definitely felt like I'd gotten away with something by the end by having seen it in theaters at the age of 6.
Yeah.
Or 5, depending when it was in the year. It probably was 5. Or no, I was 6. It was 6 going on 7 in 92. So I was 6 years old if it was in the summer. But I felt like I got away with something. I was like, oh man, this isn't something I was supposed to see, but I watched it and I enjoyed it. So in terms of like rewatchability, like out of the superhero movies, like this one is one I can watch way more than a lot of the modern ones, because the modern ones might be, more proficiently shot movies and all that stuff. But that one just has a charm to it you don't get out of the ones now, because a lot of them, you watch it in theaters like, oh, that's cool. And then you kind of never watch it again or think about it or think about the visuals. Like nothing that I can remember out of like any of the Marvel movies or like a lot of recent comic movies. I don't remember anything having the visuals that stick with me, like the set design and a lot of stuff like that. And the visual aesthetic that's going on. Because a lot of this stuff now is shot very well, but it's very, just kind of neo-modern style, where it's just like we're shooting in kind of standard color grading in a hangar where they're fighting. And there's not a lot of visual flourishes to it. And then the ones that do that, like Batman v Superman, where it's like that heavy, like green filter stuff, just feels like it's trying so hard.
I like the way that movie looked a lot, Batman versus Superman.
I just like when I've been messing around with color grading stuff and you throw in the Batman v Superman LUT, it's like, oh, this looks like trash on everything I've ever tried.
No, I don't like it. But, yeah, I've messed with that one.
But it's because you're not shooting on the professional cameras, all the lighting and stuff. But, just, I don't know, like, it's really hard to quantify. A lot of people are all about, like, their top 10 or whatever. Like, this is a movie that holds a special place to me, and I have come back to it, and, like, because I didn't watch it for a while. Then it was on like one of the streaming services like 5 years ago. And then after that, I've watched it every year. And then I know there's a screening that the Baxter Avenue Theaters had once. They had both Batman films, the Tim Burton ones. That was fun to go and like have a packed audience watch. Because like Batman Returns, I bet would be fun to watch. Because it was fun to watch with an audience of like...
Did we go see that?
Yeah.
We did? Okay, yeah. That's what it says.
It was like 2014 or something. Yeah. And we went and saw that.
Yeah.
And like everybody's into it, everybody knew what it was. And then Batman,
I forgot all about that.
Batman Returns, I think, holds up better to like a group watch like that than Batman because it has so much innuendo and all the kind of more, like you said, over the top stuff that's like kind of dark and gross, but also humorous.
Yeah, I think it's a better looking film too. They talked about they kind of went bolder with some of the colors, and just it looks like before this, because I do like this film a lot. I'm like, regardless, I'll rewatch this. Because my daughter likes it. It was free on some streaming services, got pulled off. We watched like the first 3 or at least part of the third one.
Yeah.
But I bought that 4K disc and it looks fantastic. Like some of those scenes, it's like, man, you could put this on for somebody and they may think it's a modern film. Like because the cinematography also looks so good.
One, too, like the few elements, like I think that the miniatures they use for this type of stuff. Because I was talking about the other day, because like I have a drone now, and it's like it's so much. You watch a lot of stuff now, and they just use like an overhead drone shot of like the landscape, something like CG stuff in. That's what it's become the shorthand because that's easy to do. Like the opening shot of The Shining, doing like the over the lake and following the car thing. That was a big deal. That was a big production element that probably took a lot of sequencing and planning and rehearsing. You can go pop a $700 drone out. Somebody that has no experience can go get, pretty good shot, pretty close to that pretty quick. Because, like the main things, those drones now, they all pretty much control like or video games, like the stuff from Halo, like the glider things from Halo, they fly about like that. Because they have like dual thumbstick controls and you have like a first person video view from it. So they're really easy to fly. If you play a video game with like dual stick controller, you can fly a drone. So that used to be difficult to get. So instead, they would do the big sets built out with a macro lens on a camera going over like a Steadicam or a cable system. And that's how you got all your sweeping city views and all of your overhead views of locations. And there's just a lot of character that got lost when that went away. Because now anybody can go throw a drone up in the air, fly it over a building a few times, and there's your B-roll, takes up a 30-second shot or something. Throw a little bit of CG in of some people or something, as opposed to having to literally build a set with like a little miniature people and cars and lights, and there's just something missing when that's gone.
That stuff's so fun. The Alien making of is so good. Just seeing everything they built for that, and how specific Ridley Scott was for all the miniature stuff. There's some great special features on that.
And seeing too, like like a lot of the Batmobile stuff or miniatures, like going through things like. Yeah, I think that holds up better than CG, for sure, because it was a physical thing, and you're not looking at it up in close detail. You're watching it in the composed scene, and it's not apparent that it's fake, as opposed to a lot of bad CG. Because even the bad CG in this is only used a little bit, and there is stuff in modern Marvel films, like the end of Infinity War, like people are like the Hulkbuster suit and something else are staying around. That looks bad.
Yeah.
And the CG, the minimal CG used in this, doesn't look any better, but it doesn't look any worse, and it's not kind of at a key point in the film. But just like the miniature stuff, all that just kind of makes it feel special, and like something we'll never get a movie like that again, probably. Because if you adjust that $80 million budget for inflation, it's well over 100. You're not letting a filmmaker make that personal of a story, going in that weird of a direction with a marquee franchise, probably ever again.
Yeah, who knows? You wouldn't think so, but you never know. There may be.
Well, the closest they've done is like Joker and Deadpool made for $60 million.
Yeah, and Logan.
But that was even like under $100 million too, and the Logan was still more of a.
Well, I'm saying like I'm not saying anytime soon. I'm saying like in 20 years. Yeah. Because of these it may just be like Logan was a breakout because it broke that mold. Like you know, you don't know where the money's going to go. Even the Watchmen TV show is something, I don't want to say totally unexpected, but it is like, man, it's refreshing in some regards. I think there'll be somebody that'll have that cachet, just like Wes Anderson making the stop motion films still.
I think that I guess maybe part of it too is I think they'll
The Mandalorian is kind of trying to do that.
Well, I think with the Joker, I was trying to think they'll do that with kind of B-level characters or original stuff. Yeah. But with your brand iconic characters that have been around for almost 100 years and everybody knows. I don't know that'll happen again.
I hope somebody gets that cash.
Joker was able to do it, but the reason that the Joker worked is they said, we'll make this for $60 million. And we're essentially, without, I haven't seen it. I'm just saying how they probably pitched it. It's we're going to make Taxi Driver meets this with the Joker starring. It meets The King of Comedy meets Taxi Driver with the Joker in it. And oh, well, we can sell that.
Well, Scorsese was on to produce originally.
Yeah, and then he dropped out. But so that you can sell. Saying, we're going to make a Logan movie. It's the last Hugh Jackman Wolverine film. And it's going to be kind of like a Western. In the vein of an Unforgiven or something, set in modern times with Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, bada bing, bada boom. It's okay, I get it. James Mangold has made Westerns.
Maybe WB will be hey, for our streaming platform, we're going to make an exclusive Batman film directed by Tim Burton. Michael Keaton's coming back.
the new Watchmen series.
But Burton will full CGI at this point.
But the thing is, I don't know how you would sell, in today's world, how you would say, we're going to make a Batman movie where he's barely in it. It features bastardizations of the comic characters to a lot of you purists, and it's going to have a lot of gross stuff and some S&M undertones.
Yeah.
They would probably be well, if you want to make this, we'll let you make it for $20 million.
Yeah. I will say, I have to say, Warner Brothers, I'm their output as far as what the risk they took and the risk and failure financially on Blade Runner, we're still doing, are they doing Dune?
Yeah.
Dune, Mad Max Fury Road, all this stuff that they've the Joker seemed like a little bit of a risk, not a lot, but I'm just saying
they can still lose money.
Their DC stuff has, been touch and go, but I admire them for the risk they're taking. And I don't know if this is still true with everybody making movies now, but I was listening to the Movies That Made Us podcast a little bit with Joe Dante, and he mentions at one point on one of the podcasts that Warner Brothers is responsible for making 2/3 of the films that are out there, which is interesting. So it's when that HBO Max thing comes out, if they put most of their category on there, they could be a real competitor, if they pull all their stuff from Netflix and all those other services.
Too, with the HBO, they're ones doing big time TV.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, Westworld, and then, stuff like Watchmen, and then the kind of spectacle shows. But yeah, you think about it, I do wish more stuff was made that took risk. Because you could have easily made Batman Returns starring not even Batman, just a different character that's similar, and that it works the exact same.
Yeah.
You could have made, so that's why I kind of enjoy it when stuff kind of goes,
But I think too, there's always a quality to the subversion of it. I think there's always a charm to it, oh, look what they did. Even it's always in the back of your mind, even if it's a new character, you're oh man, this is not what's his name? Who played the Penguin on
Danny DeVito?
No, the West one, Adam West one.
Oh my gosh. Burgess Meredith?
Yeah, Burgess. This is not what I remember for that. But yeah, I like this film a whole lot as well, and that's why I bought it. I'm I'll rewatch this every now and then.
Well, and two, one of my closing points is just the movie. As a kid watching it, I feel I got away with something, and I'm sure by the end of that, the filmmakers felt they got away with something too, because and two, a difference is that was their tentpole movie for the year. That's their big movie. They plant the flag in this is going to be our big movie. I don't know we'll ever get something that they let go as far out of the realm as that. Some stuff like the Watchmen TV series now, I think, is kind of really doing that, or it's kind of going out, but it's a TV series.
And that's not doing that well viewership-wise, right?
So that was more of the narrative of the people who review bombed it with 1 out of 10, because
the viewership is good for it, though?
No, so HBO has said it's averaging, because the live telecast numbers, those essentially mean nothing now because everybody streams.
Yeah.
So they think they said it's been averaging around 7 million plus viewers per episode.
Is that pretty good?
Because at its peak, it took Game of Thrones a few years to get to there. Game of Thrones at its peak was doing 20 million an episode.
Oh, wow.
But that was nearly double the next episode. Walking Dead now is far below this. 7 million an episode Like The Walking Dead at its peak was doing like, 12, 18
Good.
million.
I was wondering, I was like, man, because I'm only like a couple episodes. I've only got 2 episodes to catch up on. I'm like, I hope this does well, even if they don't make another season, like just to like, hey, keep doing.
Well, I think it's something that's just stoked the ire of a lot of people. So they just make these really negative headlines. Yeah. It's trash, 1 out of 10. Its user scores low. It's bombing in the ratings, but the actual numbers are good enough that HBO's like, yeah, it's our biggest debut, our biggest overall viewership in a few years. So
bunch of how far in do you?
I watched all of it.
You've watched all of it so far. Yeah. So it's a bunch of these people review bombing.
Yeah, basically.
I gotta watch 7 and 8.
A lot lot of people, if you watch a movie and you really identify with the villain and think that you're being villainized unfairly, you probably need to rethink your life. If somebody really identified with Danny DeVito's Penguin, it's like he's got a point.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
well, I love that the fact that you can kind of Michael Keaton may be doing the same. Bruce Wayne may be in the same position as the Penguin in this if he had been raised and born out of the same situation. That's what I like about the Penguin character is that in some ways I do think he's a sympathetic character. And even at the end when he dies and the Penguin's marching, you're kind of like, oh man, this guy had
because he's been driving so much in the movie's narrative.
He had a tragic life. You know what I mean? Like it's by the end, like the Penguins are his only family taking him in. Like they're doing like literally carrying his body like a coffin into the water because that's been his only family. And it was basically he was born a mutant, was not his choice, abandoned by his parents, like lived in the sewers, had no, we don't know how long he didn't have contact with other humans, but he doesn't know how to basically behave in society with how forward he is with women. Not that some people aren't like that anyway.
French flipper trick.
But it's like, how can you blame him that much for what he is in this film? Obviously, you don't excuse any of it, but it's like, man, he is a tragic.
There's not a lot of ways his life could have went that turned out well.
Max Schreck is just an asshole. You know what I mean? He is just a bad guy.
Well, I think part of it is Max Schreck is just as bad with the silver spoon in his mouth and publicly applauded, as opposed to the Penguin at least had a tragic backstory in life that led him down that path. It wasn't just because he wanted more money.
Yeah.
So the movie does have something to say about like capitalist, overly greedy businessmen.
Yeah. You can feel sorry for the Penguin. You can't feel sorry for Max Schreck in the slightest,
Yeah. Yeah, because he does everything he does just for his own personal benefit. So, yeah, I mean, like, giving this movie a score out of 10, like, nostalgia value and all that stuff, like, all that, it's like 10 out of 10. In terms of, like, an actual movie, I think it's still really good. I think, objectively watching it, it's still a 7, 8, 9, 10.
I even think it's higher than that.
I mean, if you just, like, I don't know, I still think out of, like, just the weirdo movie it is, like an 8.5, but, like, I give it a 10 just because my childhood attachment to it and just the fact that we probably won't see something on that scale again that goes that far left field.
I hope we do. I'm not saying you're not right. I'm just like wishing that like.
Well, I think the thing is now there's so many different platforms to watch stuff on. We will get stuff that's as subversive and is going as far out the property as that did, but it won't be the focus of that company and the marketing and output.
No. Yeah.
Because like I said, I think like the Watchmen series or a lot of stuff has kind of gone kind of far out there with stuff. Like with Watchmen, there's the Lube Man. There's like all this kind of weird left field stuff. But I think that we have passed the point which a blockbuster has, Danny DeVito as your villain in a tentpole action film.
No, and I don't mean necessarily. I'm just saying, they could spend $100 million to make an altruistic superhero film for theaters. You know what I mean? I hope we can still get to that point where, where it is like, hey, we're spending so much money on the craft of this, and we want somebody that really wants to put their stamp on it. And we're going to let him do that because we can take this risk because it is this superhero that's going to get at least this much return, and we have these other films supporting it. Like, I hope we get to that point where but honestly, as well, like, it's okay if we don't because it is a superhero film. We have plenty of great ones,
I mean, too, you have like Netflix to let Bong Joon-ho make Okja and stuff like that. Yeah. But I don't know, like my point was we'll probably get stuff that's out there and is weird, just not something that's as essential to the economy of a big multinational corporation.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yes.
With the same level of visibility and in-your-faceness that this movie would have had with like McDonald's toys and commercials and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess I'll wrap up our discussion of Batman Returns. I think the next podcast we'll be discussing, so it's on Shudder. it's now called Deadly Games, which I think is confusing because apparently there's a reality show called Deadly Games, and the movie's not called that on IMDb.
It has 3 titles. It's called something else on IMDb. Then also it says Dial Code Santa was another name for it. I don't know if we will get to it, but also Black Christmas comes out this Friday now. So we've already watched this film, but I might try to see Black Christmas if I can.
Oh, so it's also called Game Over.
Yes,
and 36.15 Code Pere Noel, the French title. So it's on Shudder, and it's a movie that is basically about like this kind of kid who loves action films and technology, and an evil guy who's dressed as Santa breaks into the house trying to kill them. And the filmmakers tried to sue the makers of Home Alone and the producers for plagiarism. So that just gives you an idea.
But I don't think it was officially ever released here until now.
Yeah. So now it's on Shudder, because before, like, I think people had like low quality rips on YouTube and the whatever. Now you can legally watch it on
it
Shudder.
Came out a year before Home Alone. It's kind of like a Rambo and obsessed kid. It's like Rambo, not quite, but mixed with Home Alone and like Blank Check, because he has like this crazy mansion that is not realistic.
But then the other thing is, it's, you know, French films, a little bit different aesthetic. It's not as...
It looks like a music video.
Yeah, it's not as instantly watchable as like a Home Alone in terms of production value and acting. It's definitely something that's interesting that
I don't think it holds up even just script wise at all. But I think it looks more interesting than Home Alone. I'm not saying it looks better, but it definitely has striking imagery and cinematography and stuff, and I think it looks great. But yeah, it's definitely one to check out if you're looking for a Christmas horror film. So we are going to do a Christmas horror film. We just we'll see if Derek can get on for the next one maybe. And then Black Christmas comes out. I might try to see that.
Yeah, if we have time. We'll see what we can do.
Unless it gets, and I'm sorry, but unless it gets like a 10% or something, or, you know, I hate to say the generic Rotten Tomatoes score, but unless it gets very bad reviews, because it is harder to get out and see movies
and
now.
Not from the crowd that's like, I hate the actual like people watching it say this is a poorly constructed and poorly acted film. That's one thing.
Yeah.
There's been a number of movies we dipped out on just because like the consensus and there's limited time and the amount of money it takes. Yeah. So so coming up there will be the movie where we discussed Deadly Games.
And you have a review of Batman on YouTube.
That I did years ago, back earlier on when I started doing the video editing stuff again. So you can check that out. But so find everything at HBTVS.com. Find links to everything there. But that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Basement podcast. Thanks for listening.